My fusion system, fusing 1,000 chickens at the start. Chapter 631, The King of the United Three Kingdoms. Where am I? Did I die? An elf who had fallen to the ground scratched his brow and gazed blankly at the damaged Mount Creation and the massive craters and fissures in the earth. Touching his body, the Elven King found that the elf chess was not on him, which made his expression change. What made his expression change even more was that the girl suspected to be King Landar III was lying in the arms of a woman he was very familiar with. Avril. You are Avril. The Elven King's eyes widened as he saw the familiar face he had not seen in almost 10 years. He strolled over, unconcerned about the Elven race chess piece. Unlike the Elven King, the other elves were at a loss for a time until recollections of what had just occurred flashed through their brains. That was what Watson had sent to them via the Elven chess piece. At the same time, they felt enslaved, which caused their faces to turn ugly. The humans took our chess piece, and now we are their slaves. The wrinkles on the Elven elder's face were all pressed together, and her tone was one of skepticism. I would rather die than be a slave to the humans. The more irritable Elder Landon snorted coldly. In his heart, the elves had always been a stronger race than humans. So what right did humans have to be served by the noble elves? Elder Landon, even if you kill yourself today, it will make no difference. We would have died if it had not been for Watson's assistance. Pagani pressed the lens on his face, and he looked helpless. To be a slave or to let the elves perish, I believe the former is preferable. Now that Watson has stolen the Elven chess piece, we may be able to reclaim it in the future. His words caused the elves to fall silent. Regardless of whether they agreed with Pagani's words or not, they could not deny one thing. There was hope if they were alive. In the direction of the Winter Nation. Frigga, the fact that I can be revived indicates that you have lost. Empress Gustav was among the many soldiers who did not understand what was going on after being resurrected. Then, they cheered in surprise. She stared at the black figure in Avril's arms not far away with a mournful expression. She had abandoned her, but Frigga still lost in the end. That made her feel very uncomfortable. Biting her lips, Empress Gustav also walked toward Frigga. She was not the former queen or someone who would remain by her side. It seemed like they were destined to stay apart in that lifetime. At the very least, she would be able to accompany Frigga to the end. Watson, I'm sorry we're late. A massive teleportation array emerged in the sky beside Watson. Sylvan exited the array. He groaned and closed his eyes as he stared at the severely injured King Landar III and Avril, who was cradling him. It should be a very joyous thing to put an end to the quarrel that had been going on for many years. Unfortunately, he was unable to laugh. A group of white-haired ministers followed him. Those ministers were holding a couple of firmly bound princes in their hands. The first and third princes were deafeningly silent, while the second prince stared fiercely at Watson. Let go of me. Are you going to defy me? He shrieked. Greetings, young Master Watson. My name is Makrotov. I am the current representative of all the Holy Dragon Kingdom's civil officials. This time, His Majesty had allied with the Elven Kingdom and the Winter Nation to invade our land for his own selfish interests. Fortunately, young Master Watson, your strength is superior to others, so you managed to settle everything and save the people. King Landar III can no longer continue to be our king. I want to support you as the new king, bringing new life to the Holy Dragon Kingdom. I think so too. Greetings to the future king. After Makrotov, the other ministers also bowed to Watson. Many people were surprised when they saw the golden crown on Watson's head and the starlight robe he was wearing. They felt that Watson was born with the bearing of a king. If Watson had not been crowned, it would not have been appropriate for them to kneel. Otherwise, they would have knelt and worshipped him. They had chosen Watson in the war between King Landar III and him. They cheered in their choice when they knew Watson had won while simultaneously fantasizing about the glorious future of their lives. Ministers, please rise. For the time being, I can't be the king. When Watson raised his hand, the ministers in front of him rose one by one. Makrotov said, perplexed, Young Master Watson, what do you mean? Is there anyone else in the Holy Dragon Kingdom who is qualified to be king? Watson, it seems like you are aware of the situation, the second prince said. He raised his neck toward the sky as if to say that he was qualified. No one paid any attention to the second prince. They just fixed their eyes on Watson. Everyone, I am not yet capable of ascending to the throne yet. On the one hand, I have not been officially bestowed with the title of king. On the other hand, I aspire to be king of both the Holy Dragon Kingdom and the Winter Nation. Watson's tone was calm, but his words were shocking. He was the monarch of the three kingdoms, not a single kingdom. How tyrannical was that? Watson did not even consult the Winter Nation or the Elven Kingdom. It was as though he was assured that none in the two kingdoms would dare to oppose him. Your Majesty has extraordinary vision and insight. I admire you. Makrotov's beard trembled a few times, his face full of admiration. The ministers behind him were the same. In the crowd, only the second prince's countenance changed. Someone immediately gagged his mouth as he was about to utter something. The first prince was the one who did that. Do not say anything else. Father has already been defeated. He is no match for Watson, and we have little hopes of getting to the crown. We should just be regular folks in the capital. I hope Watson does not attack us for Kiana's sake. Then, several teleportation arrays appeared in the sky. Several noblemen walked out of the teleportation arrays. Some of them wore happy faces, while others looked sad. With the exception of the Saint Laurent family, those noblemen were governed by the three archduke families. All of the members of the two families were imprisoned. Augustus, the leader, embraced his shoulders proudly and said, Watson, I did not subjugate the Campbell and other two families because I gave in to you. It is merely that you resurrected me, therefore, I reciprocate the favor. That is Edward's home. The Saint Laurent family head glanced around after she appeared. Soon, she found Edward in the crowd. After their eyes met, their bodies trembled with excitement. This is the border. Doesn't it look special? Many Saint Laurent family members glanced down. They grumbled when they saw the massive pits in the earth. They were affected by the family head's remarks and elected to support Watson. According to the family head's speculation, they would be rewarded handsomely if they followed Watson. However, given the devastation, Watson was probably powerless to intervene. Young Master Watson, is the battle over? We're here to help you. Then, groups of people appeared from all directions of Mount Creation and spoke to Watson. Some of those people were from the City of Steel, and Watson recognized them, such as Clyde and the others. There were also men, women, and children he did not recognize. Their eyes were all aglow with combat zeal. Watson's heart warmed when he saw those folks. Thank you very much, everyone. The war is over. I was able to resolve the war so swiftly because everyone was eager to share the power in their bodies. Everyone made a significant contribution to the war's success. To recompense everyone, I have chosen to join the three kingdoms, including the Holy Dragon Kingdom, to create a paradise free of struggle and terror for everyone. Watson lifted his hands and ignited the fusion system as he spoke. The Holy Dragon Kingdom's land began to tremble. As the sun rose, the ground rocked. As it dropped, the sky brought clouds with it. Outside the Holy Dragon Kingdom, two distinct kingdoms rose into the sky and transformed into beams of light as they traveled toward that location. That scene that shook the heavens and earth shocked everyone there. Chapter 632, Reorganizing the Kingdom. Congratulations, Master, for successfully fusing the Kingdom of Kings, the Elven Kingdom, and the Winter Nation. The size of the Kingdom of Kings has expanded. Following the sound of the system notification, Watson could sense the expansion of the Kingdom of Kings he was in. The Kingdom of Kings was obtained by fusing the Dragon Palace, the Dragon Star, and other items. The internal area was unrestricted. Nevertheless, the Kingdom of Kings territory was identical to that of the Holy Dragon Kingdom from the outside. With the incorporation of the Winter Nation and the Elven Kingdom, the Kingdom of Kings territory had grown significantly, as had the landscape. First was the north of the Kingdom of Kings. The boundary line extended from the original Dragonspine Snow Mountain outside Mount Creation to the northernmost ice field. A piece of land covered entirely in ice appeared in Watson's field of vision. After that piece of ice merged with the Kingdom of Kings, it changed. The originally ordinary ice block was irrigated by the dense energy factor in the air, and a faint milky white luster appeared on its surface. Its hardness became comparable to that of a diamond. Snow also began to fall in the sky. What looked like snowflakes were actually made of pure energy. After those snowflakes landed on the ground, white flowers filled with a holy aura grew. If a person touched those snowflakes, their strength would increase significantly. Snow palaces stood in the Winter Nation, covered by those snowflakes. They were surrounded by the Starlight-tier ice elemental divine power, reflecting magnificent colors. It was like a divine kingdom forged by the gods of ice and snow giants. It was not only the Winter Nation in the north that had changed. The Forest of Eternity in the south had also changed significantly. The Forest of Eternity destroyed by King Landar III was upgraded and grew even more luxurious than before. In the lush forest, wooden houses made entirely of vines hung high on the branches, emitting emerald-colored lights that symbolized life, beating gently like a human heart. It was like a lantern hanging under the eaves. Among those glowing houses, one house was different from the others. It was wrapped in thick vines, and it crossed tens of thousands of kilometers at a breakneck speed. Crossing the border between the Elven Kingdom and the Holy Dragon Kingdom, it arrived in front of Watson. 3 people were lying in that house. They were his 2 masters, Antonio and Reed, as well as a lovely elven woman whose name he did not know. She had already lost her breath. Even though he did not recognize her, seeing Antonio holding her hand tightly before she died, Watson could roughly guess her identity. That should be the elven girl that my master can't forget, right? Watson's eyes flashed. He stretched his right hand and waved at the 3 people in front of him. Emerald green life energy poured out from his hand and into the 3 people's bodies. Antonio and Reed coughed and opened their eyes first. Where are we? It seems like this is not the Elven Kingdom. King Landar III will not let us go. Did Watson save us? The young woman followed closely behind and opened her eyes. She had lost her life, but with Watson's help, she was revived, and the power in her body was much stronger than before. Previously, she was only an ordinary Platinum tier champion, but she had advanced to peak Platinum tier. After all, Watson was in control of the Elven race chess piece. As long as he wanted to, he could resurrect the dead elves at any time. Furthermore, he had the power of the life elemental magical source that Nidhogg had given him. The elven girl's long eyelashes fluttered as she tried to raise her right hand. However, she found that her hand was connected to Antonio's, which stunned her for a moment. Was she not dead? Why was she still holding Antonio's hand? Was Antonio dead, too? Why did his hand feel so real? Vivian, we are alive. From now on, I will not let you get hurt. Sensing Vivian's action, Antonio turned around, and a hint of relief appeared in his eyes. Then, he reached out and gently stroked Vivian's hair. Vivian, let me introduce you. This is my disciple. His name is Watson. It is all thanks to him that we were able to escape. Antonio had already noticed Watson standing in front of them. As he saw Watson, who had a pale golden crown on his head and dressed in a starlight robe, and the differences in the Holy Dragon Kingdom below, the look of relief in his eyes became even more intense. It seemed like Watson had defeated King Landar III and reached a height that he could not understand. Watson. Vivian turned her head and looked forward curiously. When she saw the young boy in front of her, her mouth opened slightly, and her face was full of shock. He looked young, but the aura emanating from him was quite surprising. Furthermore, she could feel a kingly aura on him. It seemed like he was the king of the elves, and she had to kneel to him. I can't believe Antonio took in a powerful disciple. Did a child defeat King Landar III? Vivian muttered in her heart as she nodded at Watson and greeted him. Watson also replied, "Hello, miss." In the process, a figure flew up from behind Watson and said, "Father, are you okay?" It was Christina. She had always been strong, but she looked a little shaken. Reed had a kind expression on his face as he patted her head and comforted her. "Don't worry, I'm fine." After that, many voices rang out. Some of them called out to their family and friends at the border. Some of them were praising Watson. Among those people were people from the Blood Rose adventurer team that Watson had met in the City of Steel. There were also people that he had never met before. At that moment, those people who had experienced the reunion with tears in their eyes looked at him and knelt respectfully on the ground. "Greetings to the Holy Dragon Kingdom's new king." The people knelt in all directions. The scene was very spectacular, and their voices resounded throughout the sky. It was not only the people from the Holy Dragon Kingdom who went to the Elven King to confirm whether Avril had been resurrected. The other elves, under the leadership of a few elders, also knelt toward Watson. The Winter Nation's troops hesitated for a moment. After receiving a nod from Empress Gustav, they also knelt before Watson. At that moment, the three kingdoms had submitted. Watson accepted it calmly and waved his hand with a domineering expression. A huge throne appeared behind him. It looked very similar to the Throne of Commandment. The Throne of Commandment, a Starlight Peak item, had already been damaged by King Landar III. Watson had to use his powerful strength to forge another one. Everyone here knows that the world has been in conflict for a long time. Because of that, there were endless wars and suffering. There is only one way to solve that situation, and that is to achieve unity. The three kingdoms that were in conflict in the past have now merged into one. Everyone can live the life they want in this kingdom. I swear that what happened in the previous kingdom will never happen again. From this moment onward, the Holy Dragon Kingdom will be renamed as the Kingdom of Kings, and I will be the king of this kingdom." Watson's voice was not loud, but his majestic words traveled far, causing everyone to hold their breath and focus. Reed, floating in mid-air, muttered unhappily, "Watson is so strong now. His throne is very similar to the Throne of Commandment, but it is completely made of energy. He's the only one who can use energy to simulate a peak-tier starlight item. Speaking of which, my throne was destroyed in the previous battle. I have to get Watson to create a new one for me." Reed, I have to say that Watson looks much more handsome sitting on the Throne of Commandment than you. Antonio teased him, and Reed immediately glared at him with dissatisfaction. "Don't talk about that." When Watson made his speech, he chose to use the Throne of Commandment instead of your fusion thread of the dual god. Doesn't that prove the throne is much more powerful? What do you mean? Are you looking for a fight? Antonio and Reed glared at each other, and none wanted to give in. Watson's voice sounded again. "From now on, Mount Creation will become the Kingdom of Kings' new capital. The previous capitals in the other two kingdoms will be changed to a secondary key city. The original noblemen will also lose their status. I will redistribute them according to the contributions you made in the battle." As they felt the rumbling thunder above their heads, those kneeling on the ground lowered their heads even more. Some looked happy, while others looked bitter. After the great victory, they knew that Watson would reorganize the kingdom and reshuffle its forces. Chapter 633, Is this a punishment or a reward? In Black Moon Castle's conference room at the highest level of Mount Creation. After Watson defeated King Landar III, he used the fusion system to rebuild Mount Creation into something even more majestic than before. At that moment, in the conference room, Watson gathered the ministers of the former Holy Dragon Kingdom, the higher UPS of the Elven Kingdom and the Winter Nation, and his family and friends. He was prepared to distribute the rewards there. Mount Creation has become the capital, and Black Moon Castle is where the Holy Dragon Kingdom's future royal palace will be located. Should the Saint Laurent family move here? The Saint Laurent's family head looked around at the splendid furnishings in the room and asked with slight emotion. 10 Saint Laurent family members stood behind her. Nia was with them, and she stood behind a middle-aged man, who asked, "Nia, were you injured in the battle? Are you tired? Why aren't you saying anything? Do you want to sit down?" The middle-aged man was Nia's father, Gabriel. He was also Watson's father's biological brother. "Father, it's a meeting. Only the leaders from prominent families and those who can make decisions can sit down. I'm just part of the Saint Laurent family. I don't have the right to sit down. I am also young Master Watson's attendant, so I don't have the right to sit down." "Who said that you don't have the right? You're my daughter. The dignified princess of the Saint Laurent family does have the right to sit here. The Saint Laurent family has blood relations with Watson. Furthermore, Watson defeated King Landar III because of the Saint Laurent family's contribution." Gabriel snorted coldly. On the surface, he was speaking to Nia, but in fact, his gaze had already drifted in the direction of Watson. Watson sat at the head of the long conference table. On his left and right were his parents and brothers. His siblings frowned when they heard Gabriel's words, but Edward did not seem to hear them. He carefully poked baby Jean in Catherine's arms with his finger, making Jean's pouty little mouth appear very unhappy. Gabriel's words represented the feelings of most of the Saint Laurent family members. When their family had wanted to help Watson oppose King Landar III, they had been unwilling. However, they were glad that they had listened to their family head's orders at that time. Otherwise, they would be like the Ptolemy and Campbell family members, standing outside the conference table without a place to sit. Watson's father was originally a member of the Saint Laurent family. In addition, they had helped Watson. As long as Watson acknowledged their family status, the Saint Laurent family would become part of the new royal family. Just thinking about it made them excited. Some people had such thoughts. They had chosen to help Watson not only because they could not withstand the oppression of King Landar but also because they wanted to gain benefits from Watson. Watson sat at the head of the table and saw the expressions of those people. His fingers lightly tapped on the table. The sound was not loud, but it made everyone hold their breaths and cast their gazes on him. "I feel like everyone can't wait any longer, so I won't be too long-winded. Let's start with the people who contributed to the battle. Black Moon Knight's Captain Alan, please step forward." "I am here." Alan stood up and came in front of Watson. He respectfully knelt on one knee, and his usual cynical look disappeared from his face as he suppressed his excitement. "In the battle against King Landar III, you led the Black Moon Knights to a fight to the death and did not retreat. You have done meritorious service in protecting the people of Mount Creation. I will confer the title of General of the Kingdom of Kings and continue to command the Black Moon Knights. Are you willing to do so? I am ashamed to take this reward. Because of my poor command, many Mount Creation residents were killed in the battle. I deserve punishment instead." After King Landar III fused with the primordial Demonist's power and transformed into a powerful monster, many Black Moon Knights were crushed by his mighty strength. Many of Mount Creation's residents had also suffered. Those people were all resurrected by Watson after the battle ended. Even though no one died, Alan still felt guilty about it. No one died because Watson was powerful. Alan was not capable enough to protect the residents. When Watson created the Black Moon Knights, he said that the Black Moon Knights were Mount Creation's line of defense. They must not let the enemy get past them. What you said is not unreasonable. In that case, what punishment do you want? The corner of Watson's mouth rose. He had an expression that was not a smile. I think the reason I can't lead the Black Moon Knights to protect everyone is that I am too weak now. If I can improve my tier and advance to the Starlight tier, I will definitely do better than before. Young Master, Just punish me and let me advance to the Starlight tier. Of course, if young Master Watson feels that the punishment is too severe, you can reward me with a few Starlight tier weapons as compensation. He wanted a Starlight tier weapon? He wanted to advance to the Starlight tier? Everyone shook their heads after hearing Alan's words. They had a feeling that Alan was dreaming. The Starlight tier was the godly tier. Many people would never be able to reach it in their entire lives. That was not a punishment, that was a huge reward. They thought Watson would be angry when he heard that. What surprised them was that Watson nodded. That punishment is very suitable for you. I'll let you get to the Starlight tier temporarily. If you make such a mistake again in the future, you'll lose your position as a general. As he spoke, Watson reached out with his hand toward Alan. The fused human moon chess piece appeared on his chest. A ray of white and green light poured into Alan's body from the chess piece. Alan closed his eyes and revealed a look of enjoyment. The aura emitted from his body increased dozens of times, and soon, he broke through from the diamond tier to the Starlight tier. A blue kingdom surrounded by the blue sea descended into the meeting room. What appeared in the meeting room was just a corner of the kingdom. Its main body floated in the meeting room in an illusory form. The rolling blue sea gave people the feeling of being in a stormy sea. Many people in the meeting room covered their mouths and noses, unable to breathe. Some of those who were not strong enough even began to tremble. They felt an instinctive suppression from a higher life form from Alan's body. As his aura became stronger, Alan's appearance also changed. His eyes became azure blue, emitting divine light. Streams of blue divine power formed mysterious runes on his skin, making him look like a sea god. Alan had become a Starlight tier elite with just a tiny amount of energy. That came from Watson's ability after fusing the race chess piece's supernatural acceleration. The molecular acceleration was a skill to transfer energy to other people's bodies, while supernatural evolution had the effect of allowing creatures to evolve. The combined effect allowed Watson to inject unlimited energy into other people's bodies. Without the help of the fusion system, Watson could only inject energy comparable to Starlight tier magical sources into other people's bodies. He had just created a Starlight tier water elemental magical source in Alan's body. At that moment, everyone was shocked after seeing Alan's transformation. Did Watson really fulfill Alan's request? Alan heaved a sigh of relief after feeling the surging water elemental fluctuations in his body. The power contained in his body was equivalent to the power of a planet made of water elements. That was undoubtedly the embodiment of the divine realm, and he felt different from before. He immediately knelt and bowed respectfully to Watson. "Thank you for showing me mercy, young Master Watson." Watson waved his hand and looked around. "I've already punished Alan. Who's next?" "Me. It's my turn. Let me go first. I'll have to trouble young Master Watson to punish me as well." As soon as he said that, the meeting room was filled with people. Many people rushed to raise their hands. They would rather get a more severe punishment if that were one. Chapter 634, Ascension. Next, let List come up and receive his punishment. Watson ignored the people who raised their hands. He knocked on the conference table. List immediately walked out of the crowd and knelt on one knee in front of Watson. "Just like Alan, you didn't protect Mount Creation well this time. Since Alan wants to be punished, you should come along too. Do you have any problem with that?" "I don't have any problem with that." "That's good." Just like Alan, Watson extracted a force from the fused race chess piece and mixed it with the wind element in his body into List's body. After entering List's body, the force expanded rapidly, and soon it became a Starlight tier source of power. A powerful whirlwind erupted from every pore of List's body and gathered in the air, turning into a brilliant blue divine kingdom. The blue hurricane whistled inside the divine kingdom. Alan's divine kingdoms had equal power. They occupied half of the conference room and were clashing with each other. That was something that everyone could see. In the sky above the Black Moon Castle outside the conference room, 2 huge kingdoms were in the clouds, blocking the sky. The other Black Moon Knights will also receive the same punishment. I will execute it later. Now it's the next person's turn, the leader of the Holy Dragon Kingdom's civil officials and the Prime Minister. I'm here. Makrotov stroked his long white beard as he stood up from the meeting table and came in front of Watson. As the Prime Minister, you managed to control the political situation in the royal city when the kingdom was in danger. You didn't let the ministers and noblemen fall into a riot, nor did you let our opponents succeed. Compared to the Black Moon Knights, you did better. Therefore, instead of being punished, you will be rewarded. Thank you, young Master Watson. I mean, thank you, Your Majesty. Makrotov's voice trembled slightly, and his expression was filled with excitement. Watson's punishment was to raise 1 to the Starlight-tier. He did not know what the reward would be. I will grant you the position of Prime Minister in the Kingdom of Kings. I will also grant you 1,000 men, 1,000 sea folks, 1,000 dragons, and 1,000 elven soldiers as your guardians. I will also create a Prime Minister's seal for you. As Watson spoke, he waved his hand at Makrotov. An unusual fluctuation was immediately transmitted from the top of everyone's heads. Through the meeting room window, a huge ball of light that was comparable to the sun appeared in the sky. The ball of light was pitch black in color, and one could vaguely see bones in it. A dense aura of death shrouded everyone's heart. That was the death elemental magical source that Watson had created previously. The energy contained within it was at the peak of the Starlight-tier. After pulling out that ball power, Watson opened his right hand, and the Book of Wisdom appeared. A square token floated out of it. The sides of the square were engraved with different hollow patterns, and inside it was a pyramid-shaped eye that was constantly rotating. That square keepsake was the product of the 12th era, humanity's last unified dynasty, the Two Dynasty. That keepsake represented supreme power and was the symbol of the Prime Minister. Fusion System. After using the Book of Wisdom to forge that keepsake, Watson turned it into a stream of light and fused with the death elemental magical source in the sky. The cube in Watson's hand had changed its appearance in just a short period. The original hollow shape had not changed. What had changed was the position of the original pyramid-shaped eye inside, where a black ball of light had appeared. The light ball was shrouded in a thick layer of black fog, which transformed into the shape of a sickle. The pyramid-shaped eye was initially a dead object that seemed to come to life after being inlaid with that light ball. It opened its eyes to look around. Wherever their gaze passed, everyone felt their bodies turn cold and shivered. Congratulations, Master, on successfully fusing a peak Starlight-tier item. Peak Starlight-tier item, Seal of Death. Ability: the Seal of Death has a death elemental magical source sealed within it. It can use power from the source. Its tier will increase with the growth of the death elemental magical source. Additional abilities: Words of Death. The words spoken can determine the life and death of the opponent. Anyone below peak Starlight-tier will immediately die if they are hit. Army of the Dead, can control the dead. The highest tier can control a Starlight-tier existence. After sealing the death elemental magical source within that small item, Watson nodded in satisfaction. He gently pushed it, and the Seal of Death immediately flew into the hands of Makrotov. Minister Makrotov, that is my reward to you. With this Seal of Death, you will have the right to judge the life and death of others. At the same time, you have the Army of the Dead to protect you. Watson briefly introduced the Seal of Death's effects. Then, he pointed at Makrotov, and a surge of death elemental power immediately poured into Makrotov's body from the Seal of Death. Under the effect of the supernatural acceleration, that energy was quickly raised to the Starlight-tier, allowing Makrotov to advance to that same tier. Makrotov had not cultivated. Since he had consumed water from the golden river that Watson had fused in the kingdom, his strength had reached gold tier. At that moment, he had jumped from gold to Starlight-tier, his white hair and beard had instantly turned black, and his eyes had also turned black. He had a pair of incomparably deep eyes. If one looked carefully, they seemed to be honeycombed coal-like, like white bones stacked together. There was hell in his eyes. The initially amiable temperament of Makrotov had become profound and terrifying, discouraging other people from approaching him easily. Makrotov, I will make you the kingdom of kings, god of death. In the past, everyone in the Holy Dragon Kingdom worshipped the gods, but the gods only used believers as props to create faith and never really paid attention to them. Because of the existence of faith, King Landar III decided to eradicate the demonist church. Therefore, I don't want you to believe in the gods in my kingdom. I want you to believe in yourself, and each of you will be a god in the future. Watson's voice was not loud, but it reverberated in the small meeting room, making everyone who heard it feel excited. Watson's tone was a little too proud. If it were before, they might not have believed what Watson said, but after seeing Makrotov and the others, they did not want to doubt it anymore. Makrotov had upgraded from Gold to Starlight-tier, and he had also obtained a tool created from one of Watson's magical sources. Even though the Seal of Death was only a peak Starlight-tier tool, the ability of that tool would grow with the growth of the magical source. As long as that world continued to develop, the Seal of Death would become a sovereign-tier item eventually. If they wanted to use power from the death elements, they would have to get permission from Makrotov. It was no wonder Watson had bestowed the Starlight-tier power onto two of his subordinates as a punishment. It was nothing. While everyone was sighing, Makrotov held the Seal of Death with both hands and knelt respectfully on the ground. His beard trembled as he expressed his gratitude to Watson. The younger man waved his hand and began a new round of conferment. The Death Dragon King, Nidhogg, has contributed a lot in this battle. I will confer the title of Dragon God to you and bestow you with a keepsake that has fused with the life elemental magical source, the seal of the dragon race. Elven King, you led the elves to invade the Holy Dragon Kingdom and caused a huge loss. You should have received severe punishment, but since you admitted your mistake and led the elves to surrender decisively, I can delay the punishment and temporarily bestow you the title of Elven God. I will look at your future performance before I decide whether to increase the punishment. Soon, several gods were created in the conference room, and many of them would shock the world and leave their names in the annals of history. Chapter 635, Heaven for Those with Ability. As expected of the kingdom's strongest genius who defeated King Landar III. It's my honor to be able to participate in such a meeting. A man standing behind Makrotov, who had been upgraded to the Starlight-tier with the Death Elemental magical source, muttered in a low voice with excitement. His name was Louis, and he was 33 years old that year. He was a member of the Sage Association under Makrotov's management. His ancestor was a count. Even though his title was not significant, it was not small. In addition, he looked quite promising. He had inherited his family's property and managed the family in an orderly manner at his age. He was considered an ordinary member of Makrotov's group. So, he was surprised by the scene in front of him. When he was young, he had heard his ancestors tell him stories about the Holy Dragon Kingdom. His father and grandfather were the kingdom's civil servants. They had the honor of accompanying 2 generations of kings, and there he was in the 3rd era. Every time he heard his parents tell him about the previous king's glorious deeds and how they had expanded their territories in the past, he felt his blood boil. The kingdom had entered a stable period. The other kingdoms looked around the Holy Dragon Kingdom, but they did not dare attack them anytime soon. No one knew what King Landar III was thinking every day. No one dared to guess. Louis thought he would never see the Holy Dragon Kingdom go on an expedition to other kingdoms and recreate the virtuous king's glorious scene. However, he learned that he was wrong. Something more powerful than what he thought was happening had happened. The new king, Watson, was conferring a god. No one had heard of such things, let alone seen it. After other kings obtained a victory, they would give lands or titles of nobility. Who would give out divinity? Throughout history, only Watson had been able to do so. Even though an ordinary civil official like him had obtained the power of a god, more than 100 people were standing in the meeting room. All of them had been given the Starlight-tier power by Watson. However, the number of people who could obtain the title of a god was less. Lewis did not care about those people. He was already satisfied with obtaining everything in front of him. Looking back, who would have predicted that he would be able to perform such feats in the future? He might have gone home and proudly told his forefathers that it was the best era, bragging of the honor he had acquired from Watson. Similarly, he could boast to his descendants that he had lived in that era and witnessed firsthand how unusual it was for Watson to give out his gifts. There were a lot of people who thought the same way Lewis did. Some of them were in the groups because they were forced to rely on Watson due to the orders from their immediate superiors. However, they had changed their opinions, and what Watson was doing to them was nothing short of a miracle. They would do everything for Watson just to get more similar gifts. Phew! Watson wiped the sweat off his forehead. The golden crown floating above his head had become a little dim. Using the power of supernatural acceleration could expand one's power infinitely, allowing others to become gods within a short period. However, that did not mean that it would not consume a lot of his energy. After spending half an hour, he had raised all the high-ranking people in the Holy Dragon Kingdom to the level of gods. Those people included the Prime Minister, Makrotov, who he also granted the title of God of Death. He would be in charge of the Kingdom of Kings. Then, it was the Death Dragon King, Nidhogg, who he had granted the title of Dragon God to control the dragon race. He had also awarded the Elven King the title of God of the Elves and the Queen of the Sea Folks, Poseidon, who made the God of the Sea. Watson also granted his eldest brother, Vincent, the title of God of War. He would temporarily manage the Kingdom of Kings' military affairs. His second sister, Nindi, was the god of magic and held the kingdom's chief mage position. His third and fourth brothers were the gods of commerce, responsible for protecting the merchants in the kingdom and redefining the kingdom's commercial norms. Initially, he had wanted to appoint Nia as the god of angels. Still, after thinking about Mount Creation, the people had already fused with the angel race and other races, becoming new humans. Nia had no more pure angels to lead, so he did not do it. There were still some gods that he could only confer titles on after the kingdom temporarily went on the right track, so those gods that he had conferred were all of them. Everyone there has already reached God tier. The conferment ceremony ends here. Those who have just been conferred the title of God will start working later. The prosperity of the Kingdom of Kings will depend on you. Oh, right, I still have something to announce. Watson looked around and only spoke slowly when he realized that everyone's eyes were on him. I want to abolish all the aristocracy and lords in the kingdom. The kingdom will absorb all the land owned by them. Only the gods will be qualified to enjoy a piece of land. Watson had planned to eliminate the aristocracy before becoming king. Since ancient times, any force that separated the lands and had its own military troops was doomed to clash with other groups and cause turmoil. As a result, it was better to return the land to the kingdom. Allowing them to coexist with humans generated more issues than benefits due to variations in their life habits. As a result, it was preferable to give those three races their own region for the time being. That was also why he bestowed the title of God to the leaders of those races. Your Majesty, I'm afraid it's not too appropriate. Makrotov, who was standing in front of the many lords and ministers in the conference chamber, stopped for a while with an awkward expression on his face after hearing his comments. His words were thought to be tactful. Watson, what do you mean by that? A man behind the Saint Laurent family could not help but ask. Should the nobles and lords be abolished? We have no objections if the Campbell and the Ptolemy families' territories and titles are abolished too, but how can the titles of the Saint Laurent family be abolished as well? We have assisted you. Furthermore, you have just bestowed so many titles on so many gods, yet you have not bestowed any titles on Nia. She is the reincarnation of a deity and a god in her own right. Is she not deserving of honor? Father, Please don't make things difficult for young Master Watson. Nia talked calmly while placing her hands on her lower abdomen. She made no complaint about the fact that Watson did not bestow a title on her or provide her with any other perks other than elevating her body's strength to the Starlight tier. That was because, after spending so much time with Watson, she realized he was a person who was very clear about rewards and punishments. He would never owe her anything on purpose. He must have a purpose for doing so. Even if Watson did not give her any rewards, it was not a big deal. She had already made up her mind to follow that young man. As long as she could stay by his side, it would be enough for her. Nia, on the other hand, was unconcerned about it. Gabriel, her father, was unique. He had an angry expression on his face. Are you anxious? How can they not be anxious? Their Saint Laurent family endured the pressure to help you. Who would have thought that they would end up like our Campbell family? Ptolemy and the Campbell family's patriarchs, who were standing outside the conference table, were gloating. Watson had only recently assisted them in raising their power to the level of a god. They were deafeningly silent about Watson's proposal to deprive them of their titles and fiefs. Watson could murder them with the flick of a single finger. He did not oppose them when they chose to assist King Landar III. Instead, he had already done everything he could to give them authority. They had already begun to succumb. They were a little disappointed that they had made the wrong decision back then. After witnessing the Saint Laurent family, who was also one of the three great families, suffer defeat, the envy in their hearts had faded considerably, it had been replaced by joy. They were losers. The Saint Laurent family, who had succeeded, had the same fate as them. So, what was the point of not helping Watson? Sir, don't be anxious. Let me finish. Watson's fingers knocked against the table, and the resulting sound drowned out the mocking voices of the two families. My father was descended from the Saint Laurent family. They are of the same blood as I am. In other words, the Saint Laurent family is the Kingdom of Kings royal family. You may have lost your original territory, but you have received the entire kingdom's land. His remarks softened Gabriel's and the Saint Laurent family members' faces. Are you still mocking me? Gabriel snorted. The members of the two families were rendered speechless. At that moment, Watson's voice sounded again. However, becoming a royal family does not grant the Saint Laurent family unlimited access to the territory. Even royal family members must seek my approval before using the land. Later, I shall create and proclaim a new law. At the time, whether you were a member of the royal family or a commoner, if you broke the law, you would be punished the same way, even if it were me. Similarly, jobs in the kingdom will be filled by people of aptitude rather than people of high status. This kingdom will become a utopia for those who have abilities and torment those who do not. Please try your best, everyone. Watson's mouth curved upward as he watched everyone's expressions of surprise. He instantly remembered a prominent figure from his past life saying, "These are the finest of times and the worst of times." It was up to the people to determine how the times would be. Chapter 636, The End of Everything. Do any of you still have any questions regarding what I've said? Watson turned and looked around. Anyone who met his gaze shook their head, unable to say a word. At that moment, Vincent, who was sitting not far away from him, suddenly spoke, "Watson, why didn't I see your two masters, Sword Saint Reed and Master Antonio, during that meeting? Your decision does not affect me. However, isn't it inappropriate for you to confer on me the title of God of War to temporarily lead the Kingdom of Kings army?" Watson's two masters, Reed and Antonio, had always been regarded as the kingdom's strongest fighting force, suppressing other kingdoms that did not dare to create trouble. They were very popular among the ministers and noblemen, not to mention that Antonio was the greatest mage in the past 100 years. It was obviously better to let Reed take the title of God of War and leave the position of the kingdom's chief mage to Antonio. Even Watson's second sister, Nindi, also had doubts. She felt like she was not as good as Antonio in terms of experience and ability. Furthermore, it was also strange that she did not see Antonio during the meeting. He had always treasured Watson as his disciple. It was impossible for him to miss such an important meeting. There is no problem with my decision. Master Antonio and Master Reed have more important things to do. Watson turned around and looked out of the window. On the tall branch outside the meeting room, two yellow birds nestled together, combing each other's feathers. At the highest point of Mount Creation. Antonio, have you made up your mind? Christina followed behind Reed as he asked Antonio. He and Christina looked a little reluctant. At that moment, Antonio was holding Vivian's hand. When he heard the question, a gentle smile appeared on his face as he held Vivian's right hand tightly. I have made up my mind. I have been working hard for the kingdom for 400 years ago. Now that the Holy Dragon Kingdom has conquered the Elven Kingdom and the Winter Nation, there will be no more danger in the future. With Watson's ability, I don't need to stay here to support him. It's time to say goodbye to everyone. Antonio had worked hard for the Holy Dragon Kingdom. It was time for him to think for himself. He would fulfill his promise to another person and make up for his debt to her. Vivian, I have decided to leave the mountain. I will take you to find a quiet and remote village in the Kingdom of Kings and live a peaceful life there. As the guardian of the Moonwell in the Elven Kingdom, is it okay for you to leave with me? No problem. The Moonwell is almost exhausted because the Elven King forcibly seized the spring of life's water. Even if it were not exhausted, there are a lot of New World trees in the Kingdom of Kings. The spring of life will be inexhaustible in the future. There is no need for me to guard it anymore. Vivian shook her head and leaned her head on Antonio's shoulder. Her pretty face looked very happy. She guarded the Moonwell in the past because it was the Elven Kingdom's most precious treasure. However, since the spring of life was everywhere, the Moonwell was no longer a treasure. Reed, I have decided where I will go. But what do you think about the future? Do you want to stay by Watson's side as his master? I have nothing to teach Watson now. Staying by his side is just a waste of time. We are already old. The future is for the young ones. Reed sighed. His gaze passed through Mount Creation and encompassed the entire Kingdom of Kings. At that moment, the scenery of the Kingdom of Kings was the most magnificent he had ever seen in his life. He had never thought that he would be able to see such a scene in his lifetime. As the Sword Saint of the former kingdom, he was satisfied with what he had done. The new kingdom had risen, and the old one should be replaced. Antonio, I'll find a remote place to live in seclusion. Occasionally, I can visit your place. When the time comes, don't blame me for disturbing you too. Of course, I'll definitely blame you. What did you say? Do you really believe that I'll do that? From now on, I'll follow you wherever you go. If you dare to do that, I will break your leg. If you think you can do it, then go ahead and try. Don't forget that you've never beaten me before. Wait a minute, how will you fight with a woman by your side? That is not fair. The parting was filled with laughter. Christina's delicate lips moved. She did not know whether to be sad or happy. Everyone had their own path to walk. She should be happy. Unlike her father, Reed, she had chosen to stay by Watson's side and continue to watch the Kingdom of Kings become stronger and more glorious. They were considered lucky to be able to choose their own future. Some people did not even have the chance to choose. Her gaze shifted to another place. There were 3 people not far away. They were Sylvan, Avril, and Frigga. Avril held Frigga's corpse with a determined expression while Sylvan comforted her. Sister, Frigga can only blame herself for ending like that. You don't have to do that. Brother, you don't have to say any more. I understand what you're saying. Frigg's situation is her problem. I won't blame Watson. On the contrary, I'm very grateful that he could resurrect me and let me see Frigga for the last time. I'm already satisfied. However, I only have Frigga. I don't want to live if she's dead. Regardless of whether she abandoned her feelings for her dream or not, I am still her wife. Right now, I only want to accompany her. I hope that you can bury us together after we die. Avril, do you really want to do that? Life can be more exciting for you. Brother, do you feel happy in this life? Have you ever experienced the feeling of losing a loved one? Do you feel happy after more than 10 years of revenge? Avril raised her head, her face pale and her expression bitter. All right. Sylvan was speechless. The last 10 years of his life were not happy indeed. How could he want the same for his sister? I understand. I will bury you together. I will choose a lovely place for you. When the time comes, I will visit you. This will be the end for us. Chapter 637, Visitors from the Thorn Empire. At some point, a tombstone appeared on the summit of Mount Creation. The tombstone was very simple. The epitaph read, "A couple who once loved each other very much." Not far from the tombstone, a pansy was on the ground. Looking at the dew on the flowers, it seemed like they had just been plucked. At that moment, a pair of boots passed by the flowers. "Your Majesty, we're going back now. Are we going to stay on Mount Creation a while longer?" The person who spoke was Pagani, the Elven Kingdom's third elder. He was dressed in luxurious human clothing. He adjusted the monocle on his eye and looked behind him with some reluctance. Almost a week had passed since Watson defeated King Landar III and conferred the title of King of the Kingdom of King. During that week, the officials led by Prime Minister Makrotov had re-established the Civil Officials Group in Mount Creation. They began to deal with various matters in the Kingdom of Kings. Everything seemed to be on the right track. "We can't do anything if we continue to stay here. It's better to go back." The Elven King covered his mouth and coughed as he spoke. Previously, Frigga had used the Elven race chess piece to turn him into a monster. Even though he had recovered, his body still suffered from some side effects. The Elven King was also conferred the title of God of the Elves by Watson, and he had powers that were similar to a god. As one of the races that Watson had conquered, the Elves were the weakest compared to the Sea Folks and the Dragon race. The Sea Folks and the Dragon race had left Mount Creation a few days ago and returned to the Divine Dragon Star and the Floating City. Only the Elves stayed on Mount Creation to enjoy themselves. There were many things on Mount Creation that they had never seen before. For example, some wheat that could increase one's lifespan and strength after eating it. There were also some platinum-tier magical beasts that were in the fields, but those were nothing. The most important thing was that the weapons and armor on Mount Creation were generally powerful. Pagani had changed a pair of spectacles on the mountain. The lenses of his spectacles were diamond tier. Elder Daphne had also changed her magic staff to a Starlight Tier 1 on the mountain. Since Watson's strength had risen to the level of a demigod, Mount Creation could create gods. Those who attended the meeting and the Black Moon Knights were upgraded to God tier. Each of the 100,000 Black Moon Knights now had the strength of a god. They had different magical sources, and it was not an exaggeration to call them gods. When had the elves seen such a scene? There were 100,000 gods. Even a true god had never witnessed such a spectacle. As the elves chatted, the Black Moon Knights, shrouded in the halo of the sun or the moon, flew quickly across the sky above them. Each of those Black Moon Knights flew like meteors. The weaker ones could not even see the trajectory of the meteors, let alone the figures inside them. Those 100,000 gods could be considered a powerful force in the Divine Kingdom, but Watson was not satisfied with that. He had to continue upgrading more people on the mountain to gods. That process was expected to last for a few years. Fortunately, the Kingdom of Kings had eternal time. No matter how long it took, the world would not change. That was a true eternal kingdom. If that development continued, as long as Watson was given enough time, it was not impossible to transform the Kingdom of Kings into a place similar to the Divine Realm. The Elven King, or rather, the God of the Elves, Jersey, took one last look at the scenery on Mount Creation, then turned around and walked down the mountain. In the past, he had ambitions to conquer the Holy Dragon Kingdom. He thought that the Holy Dragon Kingdom was his world, but he decided to let go of that idea after Frigga's death. The world had never belonged to him, everything he had done was just a dream. If time could be reset, he would not attack the Holy Dragon Kingdom again. Instead, he would choose another way to live. As he lamented, the Elven King glanced at the tombstone not far away from him and the 3 flowers of different colors in front of it. He sighed. What was the point of conquering other kingdoms? At the very least, he would not be sorry when they parted. Let's go. Throwing those chaotic thoughts to the back of his mind, the Elven King led the elves away from Mount Creation. They wanted to return to the Elven Kingdom. Of course, the Elven Kingdom could no longer be called by that name. Watson said that he wanted to improve the Forest of Eternity and build a paradise that could allow both humans and elves to be happy in it. The name of that paradise had already been decided. It would be called the Forest Kingdom Amusement Park. The majestic Elven Kingdom was not even a vassal state of the Kingdom of Kings. It could only become a playground for the children in the Kingdom of Kings in the future. The Elven King was not dissatisfied with that result. The elves' existence was already the result of Watson's mercy. They did not dare to be dissatisfied. Empress Gustav, who had returned to the Winter Nation a few days earlier, had also transformed the former Winter Nation into an amusement park. Many residents of the Kingdom of Kings had gone there to experience it. It was worth mentioning that the environment of the Kingdom of Kings had improved after Watson had implemented the abolition of noble titles. The noblemen could no longer enslave ordinary people and kill them if they were not happy. Even the royal family, who were related to Watson, would be punished if they made a mistake. Watson used himself as an example. A few days ago, Watson's brother, Vincent, held a military parade after establishing the new kingdom. In the end, he confiscated many things and made the citizens pay an additional 1/3 of the total grain harvest. After Watson learned of that, he punished Vincent heavily and demoted him to deputy god of war. The new god of war was taken over by Christina, the daughter of the original Sword Saint family. Even Watson's elder brother was punished after he did something wrong. How could the other ministers and noblemen not accept it? Some of the people still resistant to Watson's dismissal of the noblemen now had nothing to say. They obediently handed over their land and titles of nobility. The old noble system collapsed and was replaced by a brand new assessment system. Watson had set up examinations everywhere in the Kingdom of Kings. For example, there would be a general examination on knowledge related to land and planting and farming. If they answered correctly, they would receive a certificate of qualification from Watson and a position as an agronomist. Those who had the position and certification would be able to find higher paid jobs. In addition to farming, Watson also provided tests for blacksmiths and craftsmen. The elites from all walks of life in the Kingdom of Kings transitioned from being controlled by great noblemen to being chosen by ordinary people. The blood of the upper echelons had almost completely changed. The Kingdom of Kings was no longer as lifeless as before. Instead, it was full of vitality. That was the first time those young people held important positions in the kingdom, and they were filled with passion. Many other people coveted their jobs, causing them to have no choice but to continue working hard. The people in the Kingdom of Kings worked hard to compete with each other. At that moment, the Black Moon Castle, which was initially floating on the mountain peak, had been renovated at Mount Creation's summit. It became more resplendent, like an immortal palace. Watson was sitting in the office on the highest floor, reading some reports in front of him. Those reports had been submitted to him by Prime Minister Makrotov. The documents in front of him were still as high as a small mountain even after he had read many of them. Watson held the quill pen, corrected them for a while, and rubbed his forehead. He had a headache. I did not expect to have to deal with so many things to become the king of a kingdom. Previously, when he saw so many people fighting to become the king, he thought it was an attractive thing to do. However, it seemed like he did not enjoy holding great power when he became the king. Instead, he experienced the hardships of working hard for the people. In the documents in front of him, there were civil disputes caused by the local lords when they bought local territories. There were also reports where ministers attacked each other because of political differences. That was not all. There were also a few novels mixed in with the documents. Watson's biography 121, The Road to Become a King. Watson's biography 122, The Future King's Sister. As he looked at those two exquisitely decorated books obviously written by his sister, Margaret Watson felt the onset of a headache. After the unification of the Kingdom of Kings, he had made Margaret a clerk. Initially, that position was used to record significant events in the kingdom. In the end, Margaret had been recording him. Originally, the novels written by Margaret were only popular within Mount Creation, and there were fewer than 10 of them. In a short span of a week, the books had increased tenfold. Her ability to write so swiftly had something to do with Watson's ability to help his family rise to the Starlight-tier. After reaching the Starlight-tier, life, in general, had reached a higher level. That caused Margaret, who initially did not have any talent for writing, to have a surge of ideas. In addition, with the help of a talkative pen, Margaret's speed of writing books got even faster. Watson, take a look. Just now, I spent half an hour writing 2 more of your heroic biographies. They are about the king's younger sister and how cute she is. Things had started again. The shining crown above Watson's head almost fell to the ground. In those few days, Margaret would go to him for comments as soon as she finished writing her novel. However, he did not dare say that his sister's writing was terrible. The latest book did not even have anything to do with him. The focus was on his younger sister, Jean. Watson felt that it would be better to name the book The Legend of Jean's Heroes. Oh, right. I have another matter to ask you. Just now, there were 2 foreign envoys from Mount Creation. They claimed to be from the Thorn Empire and wanted to visit the king. Do you want to meet them? Of course. Watson quickly got up and waved his starlight robe gently. The crown on his head shone as well. It was better to meet the people from the Thorn Empire than to stay there. Furthermore, he had already occupied 3 kingdoms, and the remaining 2 kingdoms would be annexed by him sooner or later. He thought that news about the Winter Nation and the Elven Kingdom's surrender would only reach the Thorn Empire and the Dwarven Kingdom in a month or 2. He did not expect the kingdoms to send envoys so soon. That made Watson, who was well informed about the Bramble Empire, interested in the 2 envoys. The Kingdom of Kings Royal Palace sure is magnificent. The envoy from the Thorn Empire, Jayla, lowered her head and looked at the cooked phoenix eggs, some platinum-tier magical beast meat, the precious sun and moon fruits, and a bottle of water from the spring of life on the table. She swallowed her saliva. She looked like she wanted to open her mouth to eat but did not know how to do so. She was one of Thorn Empire's 9 divine generals. Previously, her king had ordered her to ask Nidhogg to deal with the countless corpses that had appeared in the Empire. She had discussed it with one of her companions, Balroy, who was also one of the 9 divine generals. She decided to go to that distant kingdom to see what had happened in the Holy Dragon Kingdom and why a new magical source had emerged. Why did the Dragon Kings like Nidhogg keep going there? The Thorn Empire was not close to the Holy Dragon Kingdom. They were powerful enough to fly for a week, but they were told that the Holy Dragon Kingdom had changed dynasty as soon as they arrived. The new Holy Dragon Kingdom was a kingdom that had merged 3 kingdoms into one, and its name had changed to the Kingdom of Kings. When they first arrived, they were shocked by what they saw. The first thing that appeared in front of them were 9 huge starlight barriers, and 9 similarly massive flying stars were rapidly rotating inside the starlight barriers. They waited outside for several hours, and when the soldiers opened the starlight barriers and went out to patrol, they had managed to sneak in. After they entered, a vast and glorious kingdom stood before them. It was as if the gods had left behind a divine kingdom. They could see the tall divine mountain inside the divine kingdom from the outside. There was a huge world tree on the mountain. There was also a waterfall-like spring of life that plunged from the world tree. Many powerful people with at least diamond-tier strength flew in the air. There were also dragons in the sky, and below them were emerald-green waterways. The sea folks were playing in the waterways. Humans, dragons, and the sea folks were three different races, but at that moment, they were getting along harmoniously. That scene almost shocked Jayla and Balroy. So, the two of them asked the people they met on the way. After learning about the changes in the Kingdom of Kings, they were prepared for a visit. At that moment, Balroy, who was sitting not far away from Jayla, picked up a sun fruit on the table in front of him, put it in his mouth, and took a bite. His resolute face was full of silence. After a long while, he said, "Indeed, the Kingdom of Kings, merged between three kingdoms, is more powerful than I imagined. The sun fruit, which can only ripen after 1,000 years, is just an ordinary fruit here. You can even drink water from the spring of life as you please. That thing used to be the most precious treasure in the Elven Kingdom. I remember it very clearly." Balroy picked up the cup that contained water from the spring of life and looked at it as he spoke. The cup was made of magic, and it emitted a pure aura of life. It had water from the spring of life, so the air could not damage it. Even though he praised the water from the spring of life, Balroy did not open it because he knew its effect. If he drank it, although he would gain eternal life, his strength would forever be frozen at that moment. He was still young, and he could become stronger in the future. "Friends from the Thorn Empire. You have come from afar, but I did not come out in time to welcome you. I apologize for my rudeness." As he was thinking, a tender voice suddenly sounded. Balroy turned around and saw a 12 or 13-year-old youth standing before him. The youth wore a crown and a starlight robe. He did not look old, but his gaze was intense. It contained everything, and just one look at him gave one the feeling of being in control of the world. "Greetings, Your Majesty." Before entering Mount Creation, he had heard that the king of the Kingdom of Kings was a youth, but he had doubts in his heart. However, since he had seen Watson, he did not need anyone to introduce him. He was confident that the youth in front of him was the king of the Kingdom of Kings. Balroy and Jayla stood up and bowed. While they were sizing up Watson, Watson was also sizing up the two people in front of him. The man had brown hair, while the woman had red hair. There was a vine whip wrapped around their waists that was full of thorns. Both of them were wearing linen clothes that were unique to the East. Their auras were at diamond tier, and they looked very polite. "Welcome. May I know what brings you here from the Thorn Empire?" Watson gestured for the two of them to sit down, and he sat down on the sofa across from them. A waiter came over and brought him a cup, pouring him the same water from the spring of life. Without saying anything, he picked up the cup and took a sip. "Your Majesty, we came here from the Thorn Empire because we sensed that someone in the Holy Dragon Kingdom had created a new source of magical power. So, we decided to come and take a look. Now, it seems like the elite who created the new magical source must be you, Your Majesty," Jayla said with some flattery. In her opinion, no one in the Kingdom of Kings could create a magical source other than Watson. However, she did not expect Watson to look at her with a strange expression and asked, "You feel the aura of the magical source? Which one did you feel?" "Which one? Your Majesty, why do you ask that? Was there more than one new magical source created in the Kingdom of Kings?" Jayla and Balroy looked at each other and saw the surprise in each other's eyes. In their perception, the only magical source created in the Kingdom of Kings was the one that emitted the death element. Other than the death elemental magical source, what other source was there in the Kingdom of Kings? Chapter 638, All Are Starlight-tier. There are many magical sources in the Kingdom of Kings. Other than the 6 elements earth, fire, water, wind, light, and darkness that we all know, all the existing attributes were created by Watson. Watson did not say anything. Margaret, who was standing next to him, picked up a piece of fruit from the table and popped it into her mouth. She sat on the sofa beside Watson and said it indifferently. "That is." Jayla raised her head and looked at the woman with a puzzled expression. From her point of view, Margaret was a noble woman with a bit of baby fat. The difference between her and ordinary noble women was that Margaret exuded a kind of divine majesty. It was as if the sun made it difficult for people to look straight at her. "That is my sixth sister. Her name is Margaret. So she is His Majesty's sister. I wonder if she's telling the truth." After Watson's introduction, Jayla's attitude became much more respectful. Since she was the king's sister, it was normal for her to put on some airs. "She is making fun of you too. Of the 10 elements in the world now, other than the 6 basic elements, not all of them were created by me." Watson's words made Jayla nod. It was already awe-inspiring for a person to create an element that did not exist in the world. How could he create so many elements that did not exist in the world? That was already beyond the tier of geniuses. Even the gods could not do that. However, Watson's next sentence shocked her. "I only created the chaos, death, and yin elements. Nidhogg, a dragon king, created the life elemental magical source." Hearing Watson's humble tone, Jayla and Balroy looked at each other and fell silent. Was there a big difference between creating 4 elements or 3 elements? "Your Majesty, you seem to be very familiar with the Death Dragon King, Nidhogg." "Not really, but he is a member of our kingdom." Roar. As Watson spoke, a dragon's roar came from outside the window. A dragon covered in starlight, which was even larger than an ordinary star, fell from the distant starry sky. Its body kept shrinking. The dragon had shrunk to the size of an ordinary person, and a baby with golden hair sat on its back. The baby looked only a few months old, and the hair on its head was only an appearance. At that moment, it was blinking its long golden eyelashes and waving a wooden sword in its hand, enjoying itself. Accompanied by a gust of strong wind, the window opened, and the dragon flew into the room. Its body squirmed and turned into a tall man with light clown makeup on his face. The golden-haired baby sat on his shoulder. "Lord Dragon Emperor, your sister climbed onto me while I was sleeping. I sleep 10 hours every day. Sleep is my right because your sister's sleeping time has been reduced by at least half. That is clearly a violation of my rights." Nidhogg was the only person in the Kingdom of Kings who would talk like that. At that moment, Nidhogg's eyes were drooping. He sounded helpless, but his face looked kind. If it had been someone else who had violated his rights, such as the Light Dragon King, Odyssey, he would have been smashed into meat paste. However, he could not do anything to Jean, Watson's adorable little sister. He could not bear to part with her. "Jean, why aren't you at home? Why are you disturbing Nidhogg again? Do you know you'll cause trouble for others? Mom and Dad will also be worried." Watson stood up and came to Nidhogg's side, holding Jean in his arms and teasing her. As if she understood his words, Jean put down the wooden sword in her hand, pouted her pink lips, and looked unhappy. "Is that the Death Dragon King, Nidhogg?" Even the Thorn Empire's king would be in awe of the powerful Dragon King. He remained the same as in her memory. At that moment, his expression was as gentle as that of a kind-hearted father, and Jayla's eyes almost fell out of their sockets. When she was sizing up Nidhogg, the Dragon King also noticed her. His gentle expression became serious, and the corners of his brows raised to reveal a stern look. "I've seen you before. You're from the Thorn Empire. I didn't expect you to come to the Kingdom of Kings. Did Gilgamesh send you?" Gilgamesh was the name of the Thorn Empire's king. In the Thorn Empire, the king had supreme power, and King Gilgamesh was incomparable to other kings. Even if one was one of the 9 divine generals, one could not call him by his name. Only Nidhogg dared to speak like that. Faced with Nidhogg's inquiry, Jayla hurriedly waved her hand. "The king didn't send us. We came by ourselves." While we were in the Thorn Empire, we felt as if someone in the Holy Dragon Kingdom had created a new magical source. We were curious, so we're here to check it out. Now that you've seen what you came here to see, you can go back. Alright, Nidhogg, don't chase them away. There are guests from afar, so they can stay here for the time being. Watson smiled and interrupted Nidhogg. Turning around, he coaxed Jean while looking at Jayla and Baylor. You two can stay in the Kingdom of Kings. If you have any requests, feel free to say so. I will try my best to satisfy you. We don't have any requests. As long as your Majesty can give us some domestic treasures and let us bring them back to the Thorn Empire, it will be enough. That way, our trip will not be in vain. They were the weakest of the 9 divine generals, so they were there to see if they could get some benefits. Treasures? Let me think about it. Watson had a headache. He tapped his forehead as if he was worried about the concept of treasure. At that moment, Jean seemed to be playing carelessly in his arms. The wooden sword in her hand fell to the ground with a crisp sound. There was nothing unusual about the wooden sword in Jean's hand. However, after it fell to the ground, it suddenly burst into a ray of light like the sun. The blazing flames danced around it and transformed into the shapes of a dragon and a phoenix. The cries of the two beasts immediately reverberated throughout the hall. That unexpected turn of events surprised Jayla and Balroy, especially Balroy. As the 8th-ranked divine general, he had an exceptional understanding of weapons. The weapon in front of him was emitting a divine glow, but the pressure it gave off was far more significant than a platinum-tier weapon, and it did not seem like a diamond-tier holy relic. There could only be one possibility. That is a Starlight-tier weapon. Starlight-tier? Oh, my God! Jayla exclaimed. They did not expect a seemingly ordinary wooden sword to be a hidden artifact. That was precisely the treasure they needed. Gentlemen, allow me to go back and think about what kind of treasure to give to the Thorn Empire. As they spoke, Watson had already bent down and picked up the wooden sword from the ground. The strange phenomenon on the wooden sword vanished, and he handed it back to Jean. He was the king. He could not think as he had before. He had to show enough sincerity to the king of a neighboring kingdom so that he would not lose his manners. Wait a minute, Your Majesty. We think the wooden sword in your hand right now is a good gift. You mean this? That's right. We will be very grateful if Your Majesty can give us that wooden sword. Jayla swallowed her saliva. She was afraid that that wooden sword was too precious, and Watson would be too reluctant to give it to her. To her surprise, after hearing her words, Watson revealed a strange expression. Are you sure you want this wooden sword? If you want this kind of thing, there are many more on Mount Creation. I can give you a few more. That's great. You're not joking, right, Your Majesty? Of course not. After all, there are many things like this wooden sword in this room. You can choose them yourself. Watson opened his arms. All the furniture in the hall, be it the cabinets or the tables and chairs, lit up with a dazzling divine radiance. For a moment, the radiance was so bright they could not open their eyes. All the furniture looked like it was at the Starlight-tier. Chapter 639, Heading to the Dwarven Kingdom. Those people from the Thorn Empire are so strange. They're actually interested in the furniture on Mount Creation. At a restaurant on Mount Creation's summit half an hour after Jayla, Balroy, and Watson's meeting. That was the original location of the Black Moon Castle. That location was turned into a royal palace after Watson defeated King Landar III. Those related to Watson were made the royal family. At that moment, the person who spoke was Watson's 6th sister, Margaret. She took a phoenix egg from the plate in front of her and put it in her mouth. The egg was made entirely of light and emitted a fragrance as it entered her mouth. It made her reveal an expression of enjoyment. After establishing the Kingdom of Kings, Watson used the power of the race chess pieces to bestow Starlight-tier power on the citizens of the Kingdom of Kings every day. The entire population was up to more than 100 million. With Watson's recovery speed, he could only give a few hundred people Starlight-tier strength every day. In other words, he needed 500 to 1,000 years to convert all the citizens in the Kingdom of Kings to Starlight-tier. It would take at least 5 years to convert the millions of individuals on Mount Creation. Watson could only choose a small set of people to help him. The Black Moon Knights were the first to help him gain strength. The 100,000 Black Moon Knights had all become gods. Aside from that, others closest to him had been upgraded as well, including Emperor Cluck, who had been with him since the beginning. Emperor Cluck was no longer a Diamond-tier phoenix but a Starlight-tier phoenix. The eggs that he laid were very different from the past. The eggs could not only increase a person's lifespan after consumption but could also awaken one's phoenix bloodline and allow one to obtain the protection of the phoenix's flames and the ability to be reborn. In other words, if one were to consume a phoenix egg, one could be reborn from the flames and never die. Other than Margaret, who was sitting at the dining table, Catherine and Edward's family, including Watson, were there. Several members of the Saint Laurent family and Sylvan were also there. Those people from the Thorn Empire don't seem to have much experience. That woman named Jayla appears to be one of the 9 divine generals. I saw her take a rope used to hang the curtains and wrap it around her body to replace the thorn whip weapon that she initially used. I found it funny. A young man from the Saint Laurent family, sitting at the long table, put a piece of diamond-tier meat that emitted a diamond luster into his mouth with a contemptuous expression. After Watson became the king, the Saint Laurent family was also made part of the royal family. The head of the Saint Laurent family acknowledged his father as their relative and eliminated the grudges from many years ago. She became his grandmother again. The status of the Saint Laurent family members rose with the tide. However, Watson had abolished the noblemen's titles. Even if the Saint Laurent family was the royal family, the resources they controlled were not even as much as the 3 archdukes' families in the past. Even if one of the Saint Laurent disciples wanted to stand out, they had to pass the test and possess extraordinary talent. The young man who spoke at that moment was called Nello. He was one of the Saint Laurent family's outstanding disciples. He had passed Watson's dual-tier test of warrior and officer. Of course, Nello was the Saint Laurent family's genius because of the family's 2 original geniuses, Nia and Charlotte. The former was Watson's maid, while the latter was one of the Kingdom of Kings Dragon Knights. Nello, don't talk nonsense at the dining table. Nello had just finished speaking when he was reprimanded by the head of the Saint Laurent family. Grandmother, I'm not talking nonsense. Those people from the Thorn Empire are bumpkins. They have no idea how much wealth the Kingdom of Kings has. That's why they treat the furniture as treasures and even use the ropes hanging from the curtains as weapons. Nello retorted unwillingly. Then, he turned his gaze to Watson. Your Majesty, what do you think? In terms of age and seniority in the family, Watson should have addressed Nello as elder brother. Instead, Nello spoke to him in a very respectful tone. No one in the entire Saint Laurent family did not respect Watson. Nello was not well liked in the Saint Laurent family. He was the child of a branch family. If nothing unexpected happened, he would only be a servant in the main family for the rest of his life, helping to manage some insignificant family businesses. His best outcome would be to become the main family's butler. However, things had changed. Due to Watson's policies, he stood out among the children in the family. Someone like him, who had no position or history, might stand out as long as he had the potential. Watson was the one who provided him with the opportunity. He was grateful to Watson more than the head of the Saint Laurent family. The Saint Laurent family head glared at Nello. She looked displeased. The old woman frowned. Let's not talk about that first, Watson. The people from the Thorn Empire might have heard that the Holy Dragon Kingdom had annexed the other 2 kingdoms. They must have been uneasy about that, so they sent their people here to investigate. What do you think about that? If the Thorn Empire wants to befriend us, I will give them some valuables in exchange for signing an alliance pact. If they have plans for us, I do not mind annihilating them, Watson said casually as he picked up a piece of meat steak. His words sounded casual, but the strength contained within them was shocking. He also agreed with Nello's assessment of the Thorn Empire as a country of bumpkins. He could not speak what he thought since he was the king. He had summoned his future self using a F.A.T.C.A.T.S Starlight-tier technique, the Wheel of Reversal. His older self had predicted that the Thorn Empire would become a significant danger to him within 3 years. Watson had always remembered that. He did not know what kind of danger the Thorn Empire would pose to him. They might threaten the Kingdom of Kings, which already had 100,000 gods. I've decided to wait for those 2 envoys from the Thorn Empire to end their visit. I'll send someone to follow them to the Thorn Empire and see what the Thorn Empire is up to. Your Majesty, leave that task to me. I will definitely be competent for that task. I will make the king of the Thorn Empire submit to your Majesty and turn the Thorn Empire into a part of our kingdom, Nello said. Your Majesty, you can leave that task to me. A while ago, I heard that Master Antonio had left the Kingdom of Kings for a vacation with his wife, Vivian. Their first stop was the Dwarven Kingdom, and their second stop was the Thorn Empire. They should be arriving there soon. I haven't seen them for a long time, so I'll take that opportunity to meet them. Another man spoke up. The man had long silver-purple hair, and his pointy elf ears were hidden in his long hair. His face was so handsome that he did not look like a human, but his eyes were filled with vicissitudes. That man was Sylvan. After Avril's death, he had completely given up his position as border count and lived a leisurely life of planting flowers and feeding magical beasts. It's great that you are willing to go to the Thorn Empire, Senior Brother Sylvan. It's decided then. Watson's face was full of relief. He felt a little guilty about Avril's death. In the past 6 months, Sylvan had never shown any sadness. However, Watson understood that Sylvan was trying hard not to let others know of his pain. That was an excellent opportunity to let his senior brother relax. There's another thing besides the Thorn Empire, and that is the Dwarven Kingdom. Soon, the Dwarven Kingdom will hold their biggest event every 4 years, the Invention competition. The Dwarf King had sent me an invitation. I've decided to choose a few people to follow me to the Dwarven Kingdom to participate in that competition. At the same time, I'll discuss the merger with the Dwarven Kingdom. If they can agree to the merger request, the Kingdom of Kings will definitely become more prosperous in the future. The Kingdom of Kings was very powerful. If they wanted to become more powerful, they could only annex other kingdoms. Watson's thoughts were similar to those of the Holy Dragon Kingdom's previous kings. The only difference was that he did not intend to use war and bloodshed to conquer the other kingdoms. Instead, he wanted to use the gentlest method possible. How should I decide who will follow me to the Dwarven Kingdom? Your Majesty, please take me with you. I will definitely take care of your daily life on the way to the Dwarven Kingdom. I also have the confidence to convince the Dwarf King to submit to you and make the Dwarven Kingdom a part of our kingdom. Nero patted his chest again and recommended himself to Watson. However, before he could finish his sentence, the restaurant door was suddenly pushed open. Young Master Watson, is it true that you are going to the Dwarven Kingdom? Please take me with you. The lair I'm in was originally within the Dwarven Kingdom's border. I'm very familiar with that place. It was the Light Dragon King, Odyssey. He looked subservient. He had been upgraded to the same tier as the Dragon God by Watson a long time ago, so his strength had not improved much lately. After the Kingdom of Kings merged with the Divine Dragon Star, the Dragon Kings did not return to their lairs. Instead, they chose to live there because they had solved all their survival problems. Many female dragons on the Divine Dragon Star did not do anything and just gave birth in peace. In just half a year, the number of dragons had multiplied several times over. The strain of competition had intensified as the population grew. The Dragon Kings had been stronger in the past, and the dragons were the same. However, with Watson's assistance, the dragons eventually reached the Starlight tier and became the same tier as the dragon god. Under such circumstances, as a dragon king, Odyssey did not have much of an advantage in terms of strength. The Dragon King was regarded more highly for leading and revitalizing the dragon race. Since those 2 points were precisely what he lacked, Watson had set up the 4 major professional examinations for warriors, mages, priests, and archers in the Kingdom of Kings. In addition, he had also prepared appraisals for the occupations of gardeners, carpenters, blacksmiths, and pharmacists. Anyone who passed the examinations would receive a certificate from the Kingdom of Kings. That certificate could not be forged. The higher the degree of the certificate, the better the person's chances of getting a job in the Kingdom of Kings. Many establishments in the Kingdom of Kings just glanced at the certificate. If there was no proof, no one would need that person, no matter how powerful they were, even if they were a Starlight-tier deity. The Divine Dragon Star also copied the Kingdom of Kings practices. The Dragon Clan had internal assessment items such as battles, ancient history, modern human etiquette, management, and so on. Only by passing those assessments and obtaining good results could one be placed in an important position in the Dragon Clan, and many of those assessments were things that even the Odyssey could not pass. Many of the dragons in Odyssey's lair looked forward to an opportunity to kick him down after they passed examinations so that they could have a new Light Dragon King. He had no choice but to find something to do in an attempt to obtain Watson's reward. That would allow his strength to advance one step further from Starlight tier and suppress those underlings with evil intentions. If it's the Dwarven Kingdom, we'll go too. After the Light Dragon King, more Dragon Kings walked into the room. They did not have the same worries as Odyssey, but they also wanted to perform well in front of Watson. Wherever Master goes, Nia will follow. The window opened from the outside, and golden feathers floated down the hall. Feathers from Nia's wings on her back floated into the room. She held her belly with both hands and respectfully landed on Watson's back. "Watson, you're the king now. It's a long journey to the Dwarven Kingdom. In order to avoid any mistakes, it's better to bring an army with you. That army will be the kingdom's Dragon Knight Legion. I'll personally lead it." Christina stormed in, clad in silver-white heavy armor. Her right hand was clutching the small sword at her waist. Her yellow hair swung behind her head, and she had a courageous expression. She was the new sword saint and the leader of the Dragon Knight Legion in the Kingdom of Kings. Several members of the Dragon Knight Legion stood behind her. Charlotte and Lily were excitedly conversing between themselves. "I have never been to the Dwarven Kingdom. I have heard that the Dwarven Kingdom not only has the most advanced technology and unique inventions, but it also boasts a magnificent circus. When the time comes, I would like to take a close look at it." "Silly Lily, we're going to the Dwarven Kingdom to protect His Majesty. Do you think we're going to watch a show? What does it matter? Anyway, with His Majesty's strength, he doesn't need our protection at all. If there's any danger, we'll need him to protect us instead. Besides, the Dwarven Kingdom is the weakest among the kingdoms in terms of combat power. The strongest in their kingdom probably haven't even reached the Diamond tier yet. My mount alone can sweep them away." It was not just Charlotte and Lily. Casey from the Ptolemy family was also there. At that moment, he looked at Watson, who was sitting on the throne with a complicated expression, and muttered softly to himself, "Father told us to suck up to Watson. If there's a chance, we have to follow Watson no matter what he does. If Father hadn't been on the wrong side, things wouldn't have gotten so bad. I've already said that people like Watson should not be offended. It's better to listen to me earlier rather than waste my time. I don't want to go to that innovation competition at all. If I have the time, I might as well date a girl." The few Dragon Knights discussed it animatedly. At that moment, another person came in from behind Christina. That person had a head of fiery red hair. His eyes were green and full of vitality. His handsome face was full of pride. "An invention competition organized by the Dwarven Kingdom? It sounds very interesting. I wonder if their inventions are more powerful than the magical tools made by the Campbell family. I want to go and experience it. That was Augustus from the Campbell family. Another member of the Campbell family stood behind him, peering at Watson with expectant eyes. What's going on? Nello grabbed his fork. His arm stopped in mid-air, his eyes wide open. Apparently, he could not understand what was happening in front of him. He wanted to go to the Thorn Empire, but Sylvan snatched the mission. Why did so many people jump out when he wanted to go to the Dwarven kingdom with Watson? Where were those people before that? It seemed like he had underestimated Watson's charm. Only one person was competing with him for the mission to the Thorn Empire, but so many people were competing for the mission to the Dwarven kingdom. The only difference was whether he could follow Watson or not. In that situation, it was already very difficult for him to fight for that opportunity because the restaurant was still filled with people. There were the people from the Blood Rose Adventurer team. They greeted Watson warmly after they entered the room, wanting Watson to take them along. There were also people from the Severed Fingers gang. They argued while recommending themselves to Watson. He even saw a few Starlight-tier dragons who shrank their bodies to the size of ordinary people. They beat each other on the ground, wanting to fight for the right to become Watson's traveling mount. The Kingdom of Kings is a kingdom where those who are competent are superior. This is very good. If there's anything bad about this policy, it's that there are too many capable people in the kingdom. Nello looked annoyed. He put down the fork in his hand and sighed. He was the most outstanding genius in the Saint Laurent family, but only in the Saint Laurent family. He was not ranked in the Kingdom of Kings at all. It seems like everyone wants to go to the Dwarven kingdom. How about this? I've decided to take more people with me. Nia, Nightingale, and Christina, you can choose some servants and members of the Dragon Knight Legion to go to the Dwarven kingdom with me. The rest will stay in the Kingdom of Kings. Yes, Your Majesty. The selected people were in high spirits and began to prepare. Those who were not selected were listless, but they responded respectfully. Simultaneously, on the other hand, at Jayla and Balroy's residence, the two of them were assigned to where the palace maids lived. Even the maids' quarters were more luxurious than any palace they knew. The things in this room are not inferior to the gifts given to us by the King of the Kingdom of Kings just now. Should we take some of the things here? Jayla sat on the soft bed as she spoke with a lowered voice. The bed she was on was a Starlight-tier artifact. It surpassed the rope hanging around her waist, whether it was in size or strength. After all, who could refuse a god-tier bed? Whether it was to rest or use it to attack the enemy, it would have its use. No, if they find out what we did, we will be expelled from the Kingdom of Kings. They will laugh at us. Balroy looked troubled. He was tempted, but after thinking about it carefully, he suppressed the evil thoughts in his heart. He and Jayla had proceeded a short distance down the corridor before being summoned to the room. A few items that looked like stones were on the corridor floor. It was unknown if the children threw that while they were playing on Mount Creation. However, after picking up the stones, they discovered that the things that appeared to be stones were actually diamond-tier rocks. That prompted Jayla and Baylor to lie down on the ground and seek any other comparable stones. Finally, they were mocked by a few passing maids. They bragged of their knowledge as the Thorn Empire's 9 divine generals. However, their adventures in the Kingdom of Kings had left them befuddled. They felt like they were bumpkins. Artifacts adorned every room in the Kingdom of Kings. The stones on the ground looked like rubbish to the locals, but they also had diamond-tier quality, which filled their hearts with joy and anxiety. The thrill was that they could get a lot of excellent stuff there. They feared that the Kingdom of Kings' wealth was too powerful. It seemed like they could dominate any kingdom in the world, including the Thorn Empire. Chapter 640, The Invention Competition. Should we go back earlier and tell King Gilgamesh what happened here? Balroy asked after he pondered that. It's fine. We have only been here for a few days. If we go back now, we will miss out on too many benefits. What if we report this to King Gilgamesh and the other divine generals learn about it? What if they also come to ask for benefits? Jayla shook her head firmly, causing Balroy to look hesitant. That makes sense. For the time being, we don't need to report to His Majesty. I heard the maids discussing how King Watson is about to head to the Dwarven Kingdom. For the time being, he won't be able to threaten the Thorn Empire. We'll stay here for some time. After we've obtained sufficient benefits, we'll bring the people of the Kingdom of Kings to the Thorn Empire. Let's do it that way. Jayla discussed with Balroy and decided on their plans for the future. Time flew by, and 3 days passed. Watson spent 3 days preparing the things he needed to head to the Dwarven Kingdom. The phoenix egg, the water from the spring of life, and a sapling of the world tree. Those are things for the Dwarven Kingdom. In addition, there is also a large amount of sun and moon fruit wine, diamond and platinum tier magical beast meat. It's enough for us to enjoy on the way. We are also bringing a lot of Starlight-tier weapons. Let me see if there's anything we missed. Nightingale sat in the carriage and checked the contents. The carriage did not look big, but it was carrying thousands of times the size of the goods inside. That carriage was a Starlight-tier weapon made by Watson. Odyssey stood in front of the carriage with a smile on his face. He tried to persuade Watson to let him go to the Dwarven Kingdom because he was familiar with the kingdom, could tell the best routes, and had a good relationship with the Dwarf King. Later, he could transform into the divine star-seeking dragon and pull the carriage. While Nightingale was inspecting the carriage, the Dragon Knights, led by Christina, who was not far away, were also lecturing her. This trip to the Dwarven Kingdom is not only to participate in their kingdom's activities but also to show the dignity of our kingdom. Do you know the most important thing in the relationship between the two kingdoms? Christina asked the people in front of her dignifiedly, and soon, discussions broke out. I know that wealth is the most important thing in the exchanges between the two kingdoms. Sincerity is the most important thing. She shook her head. What you said makes sense, but it's not correct. Strength is the most important thing in the exchanges between the two kingdoms. As long as you have strength, the other kingdoms will listen to you no matter what you say. Otherwise, no matter how sincere and rich you are, you will only be coveted by other kingdoms. This time, we are going to the Dwarven Kingdom to show off the Dragon Knight's might. So, all of you, keep your spirits up and don't embarrass the Kingdom of Kings. Don't worry, we will definitely not. Voices rang out in unison. Hundreds of Dragon Knights shouted in unison. Even their dragons roared into the sky. It seemed like it was a great honor for them to travel with Watson. I'm relieved to see that everyone is so energetic. Is everyone ready? Let's go if you're ready. While everyone was talking, Watson and Nia arrived at the front of the carriage. As Watson entered the carriage, he was escorted by his siblings, Makrotov, former officials and noblemen, and other wealthy people. Nightingale and Nia sat on the left and right, controlling Odyssey, who had transformed into a dragon to fly out of Mount Creation, followed by 100 Dragon Knights led by Christina. The dragon's giant wings covered the sky, which blotted out the sun. It looked very spectacular. We shall send you off here, Your Majesty. I wish you all the best in your trip to the Dwarven Kingdom. Long live His Majesty. Long live the Kingdom of Kings. The carriage Watson was riding in turned into a small black dot and vanished into the air among the thunderous screams. It was not far from Mount Creation to the outskirts of the Kingdom of Kings. Watson leaned against the carriage seat, his hands in his pockets. He gazed out the window at the countryside outside. There were several mountains where the carriage passed. A massive world tree grew on the mountains. The spring of life was like a waterfall cascading from the world tree's branches. Those scenes were merely a small part of the splendor of the entire Kingdom of Kings. Platinum tier and diamond tier elites might be spotted soaring anywhere in the skies. One of the 9 planetary fortresses even passed in front of Watson. Initially, the planetary fortresses merely encircled the Holy Dragon Kingdom's periphery. The starlight barrier expanded in size as well. As he sat on the carriage, Watson noticed 9 massive starlight barriers materializing in front of him. The Kingdom of Kings is now developing fairly nicely, yet it is still insufficient. The Kingdom of Kings will grow much larger once we have conquered the Dwarven Kingdom and the Thorn Empire. Watson secretly clenched his fists and made up his mind. In his plan, the future Kingdom of Kings would span the entire continent, including all different races and facilities. Everyone would be a Starlight-tier superpower. He still had a long way to go before he could achieve that goal. At the Dwarven Kingdom. The Dwarven Kingdom was located on the west side of the continent, near the Golden Sea on the west and the Holy Dragon Kingdom on the east. Their north and south sides had endless mountains that produced a lot of minerals. It was precisely because those mountains were rich in minerals that the Dwarven Kingdom could hold an invention competition every 4 years, creating many rare things in the world. The floating island in the sky was the peak of Dwarven Kingdom technology. The Invention Conference will also be held there in a few days. At that moment, a high-level meeting was being held there. Prussia, the Dwarf King, was sitting on the throne. His thick yellow beard ran along his face's rugged form, and his queen and other princesses sat around him. The King of the Kingdom of Kings is arriving soon. Everyone knows about the Holy Dragon Kingdom's annexation of the Winter Nation and the Elven Kingdom. Perhaps the Kingdom of Kings will annex our kingdom next. I wonder if you have any good ideas. Your Majesty, don't worry. We can let the King of the Kingdom of Kings see the strength of our kingdom when he comes. Our power does not lie in strength but knowledge. If the King of the Kingdom of Kings is a reasonable person, we can use our accumulated knowledge to exchange for our right to live. If he insists on making things difficult for us, we are not to be trifled with. An elderly dwarf with a beard on his face and a fuzzy head sat not far from the throne. His name was Henry Heimerdinger, and he was known as the Great Inventor. He was a well-known character in the kingdom. He had contributed many critical technologies to the development of the floating islands. The Dwarven Kingdom believed that knowledge was power. The dwarves might be the weakest compared to beings from other kingdoms, but their combat strength might be the strongest if the weapons they invented were considered. Heimerdinger, do you have a good idea? According to the Light Dragon King, the king from the Kingdom of Kings is the one who created the new magical source, and he has created more than one. As far as I know, our kingdom doesn't have any weapons that can fight against that level of power. The magic cannonball, the most powerful weapon we currently have, can only destroy a small hill with a single shot. I'm afraid that it can't even kill a dragon. True, our magical cannonballs are not as powerful as dragons, but I have lately invented a new spatial contraption. That dimensional device has the ability to open portals anywhere in the world and can even link to destinations beyond our world. The three-dimensional technology has only been tested more than 100 times due to safety concerns, and it is not stable enough. However, there is a possibility of connecting to locations outside this world, which is enough to make that dimensional device the most amazing creation of the Dwarven Kingdom in the last 100 years. Heimerdinger's voice was brimming with unmistakable pride as he explained his idea. Everyone should understand that the world we are in is simply a small fraction of the larger picture. The world was divided into this state during ancient times due to a battle between many great races and the gods. There is also the divine realm, where the gods once dwelt, outside of the region where we live. We may not be a match for the Kingdom of Kings, but as long as we connect to the divine realm and invoke the gods, the Kingdom of Kings will not be able to defeat us. The only disadvantage is that doing so is extremely dangerous. That is good if the gods are fair to us. If they are wicked, the Dwarven Kingdom will perish alongside them. This should only be used as a last resort. Aside from the spatial device, I have another method of stopping the Kingdom of Kings. This approach needs the Dwarven chess piece, which the Dwarven Kingdom has retained. Unlike the other races, the Dwarven Kingdom's race chess piece was whole. That was why they were so well versed in ancient history. Similarly, their understanding of the world differed from that of the other races. Heimerdinger, are you sure you want to use the race chess piece? That power is very dangerous. Prussia looked troubled. It was not just the dwarves who were present. Everyone who knew the power of the Dwarven race chess piece had a change in expression. The original power of the Dwarven race chess piece was known as mechanical god subduing. The power of the race chess piece could summon technological weapons that did not belong to that era. No one knew what effect those weapons would have. No one knew what harm they would cause once they were used. The dwarves used that chess piece to fight against the gods in ancient times. The price was that they summoned a kind of unknown ball. That's the bomb that contains the power to destroy the gods. The dark shell hides the elements of the devil. Once they react, the light and heat produced are enough to destroy the sun. After the bomb explodes, there will be residual radiation energy that makes the river undrinkable, the earth withered, and the people living on that land might have many heads or arms. Those were the original words recorded in the Dwarven Kingdom's ancient records. It was enough to prove the technological weapon's power. The Dwarven Kingdom has always prohibited the usage of the race chess piece, from ancient times to the present. It would summon future technical development if they were deployed, allowing existing technology to advance. Rest assured, Your Majesty. I understand that the Dwarven race chess piece is very dangerous. There is also a reason why I suggested that. I'd like to introduce someone to you, Your Majesty. This is my disciple. Her name is Meryl. Hemadinga clapped his hands, and a little girl beside him stood up. That girl had white hair and a cute round face. She was only a little over a meter tall, and her face looked like a doll. She was wearing a sky blue dress. After she stood up, the girl lifted her sleeve, revealing a semi-mechanical arm. The joints on the metal arm were gears. The dwarves who saw that scene were a little surprised. They were surprised to learn that her neck and brain were mechanical. If one looked carefully, one of her eyes was made of diamond, and the occasional rotation made it look very different from an ordinary person's eyes. The Dwarven Kingdom was technologically advanced. A mechanical arm might be used to replace someone's limbs if they were broken. However, the replacement mechanical arm was not so flexible, and they could not replace the brain. Meryl, tell His Majesty in detail what you have discovered. Under Hermoldinger's order, the dwarf girl named Meryl spoke softly. Her tone was robotic, flat, and impersonal. When I was studying a while back, I noticed that the language included within our kingdom's race chess piece differs from the language we have presently. It is a mechanical language made up entirely of zeros and ones. In the past, the Dwarven race could not properly manage the Dwarven chess piece because we did not grasp that language. We can assign the Dwarven chess piece to make the weapon we want as long as we write the commands in that particular language. For example, if I desire a spaceship powered by the sun and an attack unleashed by the sun's brilliant beams, we may write that command into the race chess piece and obtain that spaceship. If we want to get more precise, we can explain the commands more thoroughly, such as if there are 1 or 2 seats, the size of the spaceship, and so on. The more exact the description, the more probable we will acquire the thing. Is that true? Prussia looked a little excited. That is absolutely true. In fact, Meryl and I have already attempted to deploy the race chess piece. Meryl inadvertently produced an explosion during her studies, shattering half of her body. I wished her a new brain and body using the race chess piece. Only the race chess piece can create a mechanical brain capable of supporting her movement. Heimerdinger nodded before Meryl could say anything, his bushy beard spreading across his face. Think about it. If we can use the power of the Dwarven chess piece, even if we die, our bodies can be mechanically regenerated. We don't even need to cultivate anymore. If we want to become stronger, we only need to produce more powerful body parts. If those parts are damaged, we can replace them. With this method, we can create a powerful army, and we can also achieve immortality. When the King of the Kingdom of Kings sees the power we have, he will also feel fear. When that time comes, Your Majesty will show our kingdom's weapons, even if they are incomplete. It will definitely make the king of the Kingdom of Kings give up on his idea of attacking us. The Dwarven Kingdom's invention competition was created to foster the advancement of science and technology. However, it was different then. They had invited the Kingdom of Kings to terrify them and show them their strength. As long as they exaggerated the attributes of the weapons they possessed, their opponents would definitely be afraid. That makes sense. Let's do it then. To provide convenience for your research, I'll remove the race chess piece's protection. Also, every weapon in the kingdom will be displayed. It will be displayed in that invention competition if it has large-scale lethality. Other than the weapons, don't show anything else in that competition. When the king of the Kingdom of Kings comes, we must give him a big surprise. That is the Dwarven Kingdom. It feels different from what I imagined. Hundreds of dragons escorted a carriage forward in the sky. Lily peered down from one of the dragons and spoke softly. They had spent about 2 days traveling from the Kingdom of Kings to the Dwarven Kingdom. They spent a day and a half in the Kingdom of Kings for Watson to look at the area. It took them almost half a day to travel from the Kingdom of Kings to the Dwarven Kingdom. They were so fast because the Light Dragon King, Odyssey, who was pulling the carriage, and the Dragon Knights were at least peak diamond tier. What does the Dwarven Kingdom look like in your imagination? Charlotte inquired while manipulating the dragon beneath her. I imagined the Dwarven Kingdom to be full of circuses. Many tamed magical beasts are on the streets, and dwarves with clown makeup on their faces are sitting on the backs of the magical beasts, performing cards or throwing knife magic. There should be huge hot air balloons floating in the sky, colorful like magnified candy. Charlotte cut Lily off before she could continue her sentence. Stop fantasizing. That kind of empire can only be found in your dreams. Dwarves must survive too. How do they tame monsters and use magic daily? Furthermore, why are there so many hot air balloons in the sky? Will it have an impact on traffic? The reality of the Dwarven Kingdom differed from what Lily had depicted. The adjacent mines were riddled with dark holes. Massive machinery bored into the ores by poking their heads through the openings. Massive and uneven islands floated in the sky. There were enormous chimneys around, spewing black smoke. It did not appear to be lovely but rather hideous. The Dwarven Kingdom looks very similar to the world I lived in my previous life. If the buildings were not floating in the sky, if the houses were not bungalows but buildings, they would look exactly the same. Watson lifted the curtains of the carriage and looked outside. He sighed in a low voice. That was his first time coming to the Dwarven Kingdom, and he saw an unexpected scene. A swarm of black dots dropped down from the sky islands above his head as he sighed. Those black specks were separated into groups and sat atop massive hot air balloon airships. Soon, they arrived in front of the dragons. The leader had a crown on his head, and a scarlet and white cape draped over his powerful shoulders. He looked like he was the Dwarf King. In comparison to the Kingdom of Kings' hundreds of dragon knights and dragons, those dwarves in the hot air balloons airships appeared much weaker. The Dwarf King did not seem to mind that. Instead, the corners of his lips curled upward as if he was pleased with something. Are you from the Kingdom of Kings? I am Prussia, the king of the Dwarven Kingdom. I am here to welcome our guests from the Kingdom of Kings. The invention competition is about to begin. Please leave your dragons behind and follow me to the venue in the hot air balloon airships.